Hello again, my friend. I am back today bringing you episode 5 of the Watch Orakix Designer Interview Series. Today I'm bringing you Kevin Van Sant, the designer of B Sharp watches, and I'm really excited today. I know I say I'm always really excited, but I am really excited all the time because um, every time he produces a new face, his promo art seriously just like blows my mind. It always looks like a real watch, and I'm really excited to talk to him today about how he does that and take a look at his process. And yeah, let's just go ahead and meet him. Hello, Kevin. How's it going, my friend?
It is going quite well.
Awesome. So, um, first off, I gotta know something. Something that I just how do you make everything look so real without any real pictures? How do you do it?
I guess, because what motivated me to start making watch faces was I really like the watches I would see, and of course I'm not ever going to be buying the kind of watches that I'm appealed to, attracted to. So um, I think that I just learned the skills because I wanted to have as much of an illusion as I possibly could on my smartwatch. So I wouldn't be satisfied if it did not look as real as I could possibly get it.
Right
So,
on.
you know, it, I, I think, I suppose this is something that you might ask a little bit later anyway, but my origins were actually making replicas of watches that wow, I love that watch, I'm gonna try and make it. And I kind of had a feeling of, just out of respect, I didn't want to do a half-assed job on something that really was worthy of either do it right, make it something that the original maker of that watch would have respect for, or don't do it at all. So that was kind of what motivated me to really just get the details right.
Right on. Yeah, and we probably will definitely get into that a little bit later for sure. But that's just every time I see one of your promo pics, it like literally mind blown. It looks like a straight up real watch. So I'm
Yeah,
looking
thank
forward
you. I
to
mean,
dig into that.
it's the promo pics themselves are sort of, for me, part of the fun because it's part of the illusion of just trying to make it look real. Obviously, I have to suspend belief a little bit on the black ring around so many of the smartwatches, but I can't bring myself to leave that
Yeah.
in the promo pictures.
Yeah, I don't blame you for good reason too. Well, hey, let's get to know you just a little bit more, and then we'll dive into that stuff a little deeper later.
Sure.
But where are you from?
Well, originally from Princeton, New Jersey, but when I was young, my family moved overseas to Jakarta, Indonesia, and I lived there for a few years growing up. When we came back to the States, we moved to Chapel Hill in North Carolina, which I think was recommended to my parents because Chapel Hill is a lot like Princeton, college town, and pretty much stayed in this area since then. I'm currently in Cary, which is another one of the communities part of the greater Raleigh-Durham area here in the middle of North Carolina. So for a long time I lived in Durham. I lived in Chapel Hill. Carborough is another one of the communities nearby. But I've been in Cary for the last 6 years.
Right on. So, what do you do for a living then?
I am, uh, or most normal times, I am a professional jazz guitar player. Since COVID began to affect everybody in March, pretty much all performing arts have been stalled out here. There's really just no public performances of any kind in any of the arts. So, fortunately, teaching is still available. We use Zoom for that, but very few performance opportunities. In fact, from March until early October, I think it was actually maybe the last week of September, I finally had a gig, an outdoor thing, which was 6 months between the previous one, which has never happened. And I've been doing this for uh, 25, 30 years, and never have had that kind of time between performances. But it's okay. It's I'm the kind of person who tends to adapt pretty well to the circumstances and just try to roll with it and look for ways to turn it into a positive. So musically, it's actually been kind of, because I've been willing to embrace it. It's been kind of a nice time to, I've had a great practice routine, and just kind of enjoy music in a little bit of a different way than what is sometimes a bit of a grind, but an enjoyable grind. But still, it's sometimes just regular gigging is a little bit of a grind. So kind of trying to just appreciate the break from that a little bit.
Right on. Well, I'm sorry to hear that your work is so spread out so thin these days, but I'm glad you're able to make the most of it. That's awesome.
Well, the timing worked out well in a sense that it was sort of corresponded with when I was kicking into high gear on Facer, so it certainly gave me a lot of time for watch faces.
Right on. Well, hopefully that revenue stream will grow as well. But speaking of watch face design, how did you actually get into watch face design if you're like a musician?
Well, it's kind of similar story as I've heard others say. It all begins with that first smartwatch, whether it was a gift or you went out and bought one. For me, it was a gift, a Samsung Frontier, which I guess was the S3, I think.
Yeah.
And so I think that was almost 3 years ago. And so at first I was like, oh, cool, it's a smartwatch. And then realized, oh, you can download faces for it. And uh, I guess I was never a watch guy. Before that, I hadn't worn a wristwatch since maybe I was in high school. And so it wasn't that I was already, I didn't have a bunch of mechanical watches, which maybe is surprising to some people who maybe think of me as a mechanical watch guy. Um, but as I started looking at watches, pictures of watches, and just like, wow, these are really cool. And then I'd see, I was always drawn to the independent makers. There's a whole world of these guys who are just master artisans, both in the mechanical and engineering of the complications of the watch, but also just in the gorgeous finishing of the guilloche dials and hand polishing of just these tiny little parts that I'm used to seeing them on a 20-inch computer screen, but these things are just millimeters. And I've read like the bridge of that you see on some mechanical watches, like the bridge is what is the supporting arm of some of the components, and like read somewhere that the bridge of the tourbillon of a Parmigiani watch takes something like 200 hours, man hours, just to polish that bridge, or something.
Wow.
I mean, like these are like the super high end watches, but those are I don't know, the ones just from pictures that I'm really drawn to. And uh, so that, as I mentioned earlier, that was sort of what got me into designing the details and thinking about trying to bring that sort of vibe that those have, as much as can be done to digital designs.
Well, I think you nailed it. I mean, I love all your work because I started in the same kind of way where, my faces, I have some crazy ones here and there, but my real passion is trying to create a digital face that looks as close to real as I can. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna do it in 3D because what's the best way to make a 3D image? Make it in 3D and then take a picture of it. I'm like, yeah, let's do that. But I still think your 2D, start from scratch, pure Photoshop images still look more realistic than mine. And I'm still like, like I said, mind blown every time.
I mean, there's so many different ways to get there, and that's part of the fascinating thing is that's what I enjoy. the interviews that you've already done that I've watched, it's just really interesting to see other people's process and their thought process, how they go about getting from point A to point B, and so yeah, I guess I'm kind of a self-taught guy in everything I do. That's just my makeup. I'm a professional musician. I teach at university, but I'm a self-taught player. I don't have formal music education myself. It's just how I am. So my Photoshop skills, it's sort of the same path, just trial by error and figuring out as you go along. So that's why it's interesting to me to see other people's, because it's always insightful. Like, oh yeah, maybe I didn't need to be reinventing the wheel this way. It's already a simpler way to do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, the workflow is always my favorite part too. So I share that feeling with you as well. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say your favorite style to design is analog. I mean, that's pretty much what I see
Only
all your pieces.
yeah, obviously. I mean, I actually have not done a pure digital design ever, and maybe I
Yet.
will, maybe I won't at some point. At this point, I don't have plans. I've kind of thought about it, but I don't really have any ideas. And
Someday.
it,
Someday
it's
you'll get to the point where you feel like you need to push your bar. You're like, okay, I've got this nailed down. Now I'm just gonna have to push the bar a little bit and get out of my comfort zone.
well, we'll see. I've been doing some chronographs lately, so maybe that's all. That's already pushing my boundary a little bit. But it's for me. There are a lot of similarities in in things in music and watchmaking, and for that matter, I actually one of my other favorite things to do is play tennis, and I actually think there are a lot of similarities between tennis and making watches and jazz music specifically because of the improvisational aspect of it. But I made the choice a long, long time ago at the beginning of pursuing music as a career that I would not play music that wasn't what I felt was my language. I didn't because I felt one, I didn't want to do it, and I didn't want to be inauthentic. If somebody wanted to hire a bluegrass player or a beach music guy, sure I could fake it, but they'd be better served by hiring somebody who that was their thing.
Right.
So, and I didn't ever want to dread going to a gig to be at a point where music was something that I had any negative associations with. So I would turn down those kind of gigs and just focused on okay, develop what I can out of my niche of jazz music. And so I don't know. My view of the watches is kind of similar. That since I'm not really drawn to analog watches, if that changes, then I would go there. But otherwise, I don't feel like it's really be an authentic expression for me to design them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it. So maybe you won't get a digital in the future.
We'll see. I mean, what I do, I mean, I like the information of a smartwatch. I mean, to me, that's why I have it. I suppose if you don't take advantage of the features that the fitness tracking, the pedometers, and easy access to weather, things like that. So I do sort of feel like those should be integrated into a design, and I do. But as you've seen, I put them sort of under the surface, so you have to tap to expose all that rather than have it be integrated into
Right.
design. Partly because I guess I'm still thinking in terms of trying to think in terms of mechanical realism. So I guess I'm thinking of complications that exist on watches, and so putting like a weather dial or like a temperature gauge or a steps gauge on one of the sub dials. They look great when I see them, but I don't know. For me, it's not quite compatible with my view of how I want to sort of just be um, consistent about mechanical complications.
Complications is a good word for it. They picked a good one. It's complicated.
Yeah,
Like,
especially when you see under the hood. I mean, I'm sure you've seen you can see skeleton watches, or if you just see like the backs of so many great watches that have a crystal back, so you can see the works inside. And man, and just to imagine how small those are, uh, it's
Yeah,
really unbelievable.
it's out there for sure. I beyond my comprehension for sure. That's why I designed digital and not real ones. Otherwise,
Right,
I'd be out there designing real faces if I
right.
could know understand the engineering of it. Well, so I guess at this point, speaking of all that kind of stuff, is I would like to have you talk a little bit about your workflow. And we actually have this really cool time lapse video that you created for us. So I'm going to play that in the background and I'm going to let you go ahead and talk about your workflow. And then just kind of, yeah, just enjoy the video because it's pretty awesome.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to talk about it as we're watching it. So to I had never done time lapse before, and the end result is actually pretty fun to watch, I think. Um, but I decided I would start with a set of hands that I really liked. I'd made for a previous watch called Duality. That was not it's a pretty recent one. And I just liked those hands a lot, so I thought, all right, I'll start. So you can see that it started with a blank canvas and those hands. And then as I just looked at it, I thought, well, let me try to put the guilloche dial in there, so you can see that that goes in. And started messing around with some sub dials, and you'll see as it goes on that the guilloche kind of comes and goes a little bit, and finally it goes. It just I never found it quite compatible with the hands. Um, but yeah, my process usually is put some things on the screen, and then I can start to visualize a direction. So the subdials got on there. I can kind of see a balance, sort of a visual weight is the way I describe it. So that will influence where I put some other elements, because I just kind of see, okay, there's a subdial on the left. I need a little bit of counterweight on the right. So you'll see my logo will appear eventually over there on the right side. Um, because I was starting with these hands, as I made those markers, my goal was to have them feel like they belong with the hands. So I used the same style. Um, you'll also see that occasionally it cuts away to another watch face, because in Photoshop I might have worked out some of the layer styles on a previous design, and so in this case, the texture that I used for the luminescent fill portion of the hour markers, I had saved in another watch face. So I open that watch face, I can just cut those layer properties and then paste it into this new one. Um, and similarly, I had some saved day of the week and also date subdial layouts already in another watch, so I just can import those in rather than start from scratch. Uh, so once I get the basic layout out, then I start to finish it. And so here you can see some textures being added. Um, I think earlier, as I was talking, there were some other subdial styles that sort of were peeking in there. I was still trying to make that guilloche work, and it never did, although I really liked the guilloche with those subdials, just not with these hands. So I'm definitely going to do this same face um, with a slightly different style, with different hands, using that guilloche and those other subdials. Um, but yeah, I mean, as it unfolds, you can just sort of see as I do the finishing, and then once that's done, it's just some of the details of getting like all the indexes. And here I thought it would be kind of fun to do I'm gonna say sapphire dial, which is like a glass ring around the outside, to put the minute and second ticks on that, so it's above the hour markers rather than compress things um, to make it smaller on the screen.
Yeah, I thought that
Uh,
was pretty cool.
yeah, thanks. It was kind of fun. I always actually like working with, like, just trying to simulate a glass dial. Any kind of transparent dials. It's just always kind of fun. So I hadn't done one like this before. I like the way it came out. Um, I think as this goes on, Still, the guilloche probably appears one or two more times because I thought, no, maybe it still will work, but but in the end, this sanded base I think really was much more compatible with everything else that was going on. So yeah, I mean, I guess at this point in the workflow, you can see I'm just kind of filling out. Again, I thought I need a little bit of more balance, maybe a little bit more information for the chronograph, so I put those numbers on the ring. This face, it can alternate between chronograph or just a calendar where the subdials are day of the week and date, and those numbers on that inner ring will disappear in that mode. Um, I remember still when somebody first told me of the Photoshop trick where if you hold down the Alt, Control, and Shift key and letter T at the same time, that repeats the last transformation.
Wait,
And man,
what?
that's a life changer.
Yeah, I didn't know. I don't even know that one.
So when you see like all these, like I make a line with this shape, and then and then you see it just repeating. That's just me pressing, those four keys at the same time. Whereas it used to be like, oh, this is so tedious, takes forever to do this, and getting carpal tunnel syndrome. So yeah, again, like if I maybe had just watched a tutorial at some point, that would have been.
I probably should have also because I didn't know about that trick.
And so, and this, what I'm doing here with the power dial, the I do a lot of what I call a subtractive method. I think probably a lot of what I'm doing here in Photoshop probably could be done a lot simpler in Illustrator if I used that, but I don't. But you say I make a circle and then start removing stuff as opposed to just I don't know. I imagine there's uh, a more efficient way to do it, but a lot of the geometry I do. I think earlier, if you saw, I did some subtractive things for the hour markers as well. Often I'm starting with circles and then removing material to leave what I want, so that all the indicators on the power dial came about that way. And here I guess it's basically done. I feel like the guilloche will appear one more time, like, or maybe at least the other subdials where I'm still thinking maybe it'll work. Just one last chance, uh, but then it fades away. So this one has some color options. I think for the time lapse, I just dressed them up in red, and then later uh, I made five or six other color options for the accents. And I guess there's still the loom to come to, as well, which again you'll see it pop up to another face because I had the layer style settings for what I use on the hands and the markers already worked out on the duality face. So I go over there. I did not use a subdial loom on that face. So I think here momentarily it goes to, yeah. So I went to this Photoshop file where I already had the hand to work the loom into that one, and then just brought it in here for the. I'll use these pictures for the promo. This is 2000 by 2000 pixels as opposed to exporting from the Facer Creator. 'Cause this is much higher quality. So for my full illusion of my promo pictures, I like to use these the export from Photoshop. This is
Yeah.
the last touch. There was just putting the B sharp and pretty much done. Looks like maybe one last peek at the other subdials, maybe. Yeah, I guess you can sort of, yeah, there they are. See, no, they're not going to work. Take them out. So yeah, that's that. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me to see the time lapse because I hadn't done that of my own work before. Just like the little details that shading things that probably I might sit there and spend 20 or 30 minutes just moving a shadow around until it looks right. And so it's kind of funny to see that happen just in sped up mode.
Yeah, and I mean, when I watched it, I was mesmerized the whole time. It was, it It was gorgeous. That's all I can really
Well,
say.
well, thanks. I love these. I mean, I look forward to seeing the workflows of anybody else that you interview too, because it's always like a fascinating thing to see.
Yeah, we're still new in this. This is only episode 5, so we're trying to kind of figure out how like the best way of doing everything, and I think this like turned out really well. So I'm really excited to share it with people. Um, so now that we've actually watched you kind of go from start to finish, and then we kind of talked a little bit about your inspiration already, kind of where that drive to create these realistic, 3D looking watch faces came from. Is there any more you can say about inspiration?
Well, I mean, part of it for me is also I don't know, just overall balance. So it's not specifically watch face inspiration, but just sort of creative fuel in a way. I mean, so I've always found it productive and just helpful to have a creative outlet that is not related to music. So whether it be like the beginning of the lockdown here in March, we just happened to have a tree in our front yard come down from heavy snow in the winter. So we had this spot in our front yard that needed something to do. So I'd ordered a bunch of stacking stones to make a raised flower garden, and always like just working with stones is something that it's it's art form, just like painting or whatever. So just having some other creative outlet like that, I always find, I don't know if it's just the fact of some sense of accomplishment, or if it's just the process of doing any creative uh, endeavor just kind of opens some doors in your mind and your ideas that transfer over to your other endeavors. But I always sort of feel musically inspired when I do something else. So anytime I finish a watch face or an idea, I realize, okay, this is actually an idea that will work. Then I usually have like a really good practice session when I sit down and play some music, because I just feel kind of inspired by that. And it can kind of be the same thing if I've had a busy week of gigs. Uh, yeah, speaking sort of pre-March, but I can just remember like coming back from a road trip where it's like, yeah, I've got all just feel motivated to take a break from music for a minute and just try to get some of these ideas out and put a couple of watches together. So it's all related. I think it's not so much about necessarily specific inspiration that is like directly translatable, although that happens too. You know, there was an example. There was a watch. I'm probably butchering the name, but I think it's Crayon, Krayon, I believe. He had this, the word complication again. This amazing watch, which has, it's a mechanical watch that has a day-night indicator, a sunrise sunset indicator that actually the aperture moves as the I guess the daylight hours shift, and within that has the 24-hour dial, and really unusual for a mechanical watch. And I think I've seen at least four of us who were inspired by that to incorporate the concept into a watch face. And so, I mean, that's maybe an example of where seeing a watch has like a direct, maybe a direct inspiration. It could just be a color that you see. A lot of times for me, it's seeing a particular texture. Like I have a lot of fun trying to make a certain geode shape pattern that I've seen, and trying to see if I can basically machine that myself. It's like one of the faces that you have on uh, in part of this collection is called Make Your Own Masterpiece, and that is, I think it has 8 or 9 different what would be called machined textures. So the in mechanical watches, these are all done on engine turning um, equipment to carve or engrave these textures into silver or gold or whatever material they're using. There's one guy who even uh, took the machine engine turning onto meteorite, which is amazing. He's the first guy to do that.
That's
Um,
interesting.
so yeah, try to bring that and do a digital equivalent of that, which is a lot of fun. So I suppose that's another more direct watch inspiration.
Yeah. So, what do you think the hardest part about designing a face is?
Sometimes maybe knowing when to stop. I mean, I think just sort of making that decision, like, okay, this is it. I can stop, even if it's just one element. I mean, and this is what I alluded to earlier. It's a similarity with music, and in composition, a lot of times you just are sort of tweaking and tweaking. At some point, you have to say this song is done, and you accept it, and that's it. That's what it's gonna be,
I'm bad at that.
and yeah, that sometimes is a challenge, but I think probably uh, it's the kind of thing that you once you develop that, I don't know, that awareness of that this is a fact of the creative process, that you have to learn to accept that something is complete. Doesn't matter what the art form is. You're able to maybe bring that to whatever you're doing. So I think the fact that I have a lot of history with music of coming to that point of a process, that it maybe makes it easier for me to feel that way about a watch face. That okay, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, that is hard for me. I totally understand that. Because I'm such a perfectionist to the point where it causes issues, and it's something that I'm trying to work on. So the new motto that I heard earlier this year was, if it's a 7, ship it. Just like, so like,
Like that.
as long as it's at least a 7, you feel good about it, you learn something. The next one can be just a little bit better. If it's a 7, ship it.
Well, and the other thing that I always remind myself with watch faces, to for the most part the stakes are pretty low, right? I mean, like, so what happens if you put something out and you look at it and later you think, oh man, that is really lousy. So as long as you're not undermining your reputation, I suppose, then it's you don't want to suddenly just put out a flurry of subpar work. But if you put something out and in the end you don't like it, and maybe nobody else likes it, in the end of the day, what harm has been done?
Right?
You can
Yeah.
leave it or you can redo it. So it's that, I guess that just gives me further just confidence that okay, it's not like I've invested $30,000 into this, and here it is. I'm launching my product. I hope it works.
Right.
It's okay. I've put some hours into it, but if if it's a flop, or if I turn around and hate it, then it's like, oh well, so what?
So, um, do you have any kind of advice for new designers? I mean, maybe even on that, like, how do you decide when it's done?
Well, I guess I guess that's slightly two separate questions, but the first part's easier for me. Like, my best advice is sort of what I was saying about myself earlier, in that you just stay true to what you feel is your language, or what appeals to you. Don't try necessarily to predict what somebody else is going to want or design for somebody else. If you make what appeals to you, then you'll be happy, at least, and you're more likely to really do a great job with it. And that's, in the end, I always feel like uh, quality and sincerity. I feel like they jump out. Uh, Again, I felt that way about music. Jazz is much smaller market, piece of the market in the music world, but I've observed that when you have, no matter what kind of music it is, if you are someplace and you see a group of musicians who are genuinely having a great time at what they do, doesn't matter if it's your style of music or not, you are still to some degree drawn to that because of how genuine it is. And I think the same thing. If you're making a watch face, do what appeals to you, and it's sort of the if you build it, they will come mindset. I feel like you and I had a
Hmm.
conversation about that once before, um, but yeah, I mean that's my best advice. Stay true to yourself.
Very true. Yeah, I mean, we're sensing a theme here after a number of these interviews. That advice comes up just about every time, and it's so true because there's so many people out there. You'll find that if you like something, there will be others that like it as well. I mean, and you can do anything. Like there's professional hula hoopers out there. You could be a
That's
professional
true.
watch designer. If you like it, others will too. You just find the right people, and they'll find you as long as you stay true to yourself. So I fully believe in that.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, as far as the second part of your question was advice for how to judge something complete. I guess it's kind of related. I mean, like if you look at it and you say, "Yeah, I really like this," but you have to just resist the temptation to think, "Oh, there's still got to be something I can do. There's still got to be something I can do." At some point, think instead of thinking that way, think, "Okay, this will be version one, and maybe later I can do version two." So there's something extremely rewarding about completing a project, and I think that it also it's self-perpetuating. If you complete one project, you feel like, oh, okay, that wasn't actually so hard, and you kind of want to do it again because it's so rewarding, and so it makes it easier the next time to kind of say, okay, we're there at the finish line.
right. Yeah, it makes sense. I can see that for sure. Well, we're getting close to the end of this thing. But I'm just wondering, do you have any other designers that you totally love? Like any you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like I'm blanking out on the word, but I think you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying, and I do. I mean, of course, I have great respect for all of the designers in the partner program with Facer. I mean, everybody just it's amazing to see how consistently good work and identifiable. Like I feel like just I can see any face and I know which guy designed that. Um, so I mean, respect to all of you guys, and obviously within it might be surprising to some, but the one guy who I don't know right now kind of stands out to me from a graphical standpoint, and I'm going to butcher his name too, is Almanurov. And that may be surprising because he's does a lot of kind of crazy digital designs or digital slash analog. But I just love his graphics, and it's amazing what a range of ideas he has. Uh,
Yeah.
and yet they all, I mean, you can just, like, I see them pop up on the new faces feed, and I said, yep, that's another one from him. And, but,
Like pretty much every hour on the hour there's a
yeah,
new like
right.
hit Almarnov
It's both
piece.
prolific, but also, I mean, just consistently, like, it's like, wow, what a great, and sometimes it's like an idea, like, yeah, man, it's like, it seems kind of obvious, but nobody else thought of that. So, um, so yeah, but I also just like to mention two guys who are not in the partner program who I really like. One is goes by Mach One. His name is Rich McGilchrist. He's another one who just is very prolific and very consistent and has a lot of ideas. I just really I like his work a lot, and he and I communicated quite a bit back in the spring when we were both designing a lot of watches and kind of arrived onto the Facer scene around the same time. So, uh, you know, I've gotten to know him a little bit. I just really like his work. Another one is a guy who goes by JH, and I've seen his designs, I guess, for as long as I've been on Facer as well. I think he's somebody else who has a lot of creative ideas and a really identifiable graphic style. Almost reminds me a little bit of Orion in a way that there's something very specific about his graphical approach which really identifies it as his work. Although nobody is as consistent as Orion. I mean, it's like almost like comically amazing to me how his watches. It's like a line. It's like it's perfect how much they all relate to each other, but yet it's always a different watch at the same time.
Yeah, then we were just recently talking about that actually. It's
Yeah.
he is very much a master at his style for sure.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's so many guys who I really respect. I mean, Nathan, of course. I mean, he's like such a real pro, um, and I mean, I think I've watched all of these interviews, and I believe everybody has mentioned Nathan, and of course Gauss is guy another name I'm sure I'm butchering. Um, I don't know why people can't have easier, simple names. But obviously, long before I was on Facer, actually, I think he and I were admiring each other's work via Instagram. So I think he and I've had a mutual respect for a long time. I mean, he's his attention to details is really amazing. So
That's for sure. All right, man. Well, one more question for you. Do you have a favorite face of yours?
yeah, that's a tricky question. Usually, kind of whatever is the most recent thing I've completed is my favorite. I almost want to, if I had to go back, there are a couple that, I don't know, there's one I did called the Ambassador, which, I don't know, the reason I might select that as one of my favorites is one, I think it's realistic in that actually it could be a mechanical, it's got a lot of complications, but yet it could be, but it integrates a lot of the elements that have inspired me, and yet at the same time, I feel like it is 100% B sharp. So I'm particularly fond of that face. The one that I referred to earlier called "Make Your Own Masterpiece." I, I I like that one a lot because of sort of what I described earlier. Just it to me, it is as much of the equivalent of there's like a whole dozens of watchmakers who sort of venture into that to try to make that style watch. The George Daniels uh, engine turned dials, and it's like its own genre that it's almost like a lot of watchmakers want to try and tackle that. And so for me to try and tackle that, yeah, I feel like I put something together that's pretty nice, and so I'm pretty proud of that one too. Although stylistically, maybe it's not the one that I wear as frequently as some of the others.
Well, I think that's a good answer because honestly, when I look at all your faces, I'm like, I I can't pick one, so I'm interested to see what he has to say about this question.
Well, yeah, whatever the next one is, that's gonna be my new favorite.
All right. Sounds good. All right, man. Well, do you have any questions for me?
I do actually. Two. One will be a lot easier than the other. The first one is what in the world is Orakix?
Is this the easy one or the hard one?
This is the easy one.
Okay. Um so a long time ago, when I was a teenager, a friend of mine had wrote a book and he wanted to use my personality essentially as a character in the book, and I had to come up with a name. Um, the name was supposed to kind of, I mean, I don't even really know what like language it could ever come from, but it was supposed to kind of sound foreign of some sort, Russian or something along those lines. So the name I came up with was Relaska Orakix. It was kind of based on Relaska was kind of loosely based on the word Shalashaska, which was from Metal Gear Solid, like a video game, one of the characters. And then um, Orakix came from kind of the the team Oraka Viper, which is like a Dodge Viper race team. So I just kind of manipulated those words a little bit to kind of create Relaska Orakix. I used to go by Relaska a lot, and then I felt like Orakix kind of fit my style a little bit more, so I kind of switched to that, and that was just like my gamer tag for a long time, and then it became my streamer tag or whatever, where I was live doing live shows, and so my online persona essentially became Orakix. So that's just kind of
Yeah,
where it's
that's
kind of
cool.
came from.
But maybe that wasn't the easy question. So, part B of that question is how did you like your character in the book?
uh, if I'm being honest, I never read it.
Oh, well, something to look forward to.
I have it in here somewhere. It's in storage, but never got around to it, so I probably should read it.
Well, so if you got time for the second question, um, I'm kind of curious what you imagine both yourself, your role in making watch faces, but also I don't know smartwatches in general or Facer in general. How do you sort of foresee the future in 2 years, 5 years from now?
um, well, I mean, I would have wanted to say that, smartwatches are definitely growing. The idea behind them is growing. The tech is growing. Everything's growing. So I for sure see them getting bigger. Mechanical watches, there's something that you just can't reproduce no matter how hard you try. So they're not going anywhere. But it's really hard to say, especially with the whole COVID thing. Like, honestly, I don't really know where that's going. Hopefully, not anywhere bad or worse, I should say, than it is. But um, I think health is a big thing right now. A lot of people are focusing on health, and a lot of people that didn't really care about health are starting to really pay more attention to it. So, all the bells and whistles that smartwatches have are definitely going to become more interesting to some people that may not have cared before. Um, and I think that'll just kind of help continue to grow. And the more people that have smartwatches start to realize that how customizable they are, faces I think are gonna continue to grow in popularity as well. So I don't see it going downhill anytime time for sure. So
I just hope that they can get rid of that black ring around all these watches.
yeah, I mean, once they do that, they're gonna solve a lot of problems because that's. So, I mean, I have a lot of watches that have the black ring, and I the watches that I wear regularly typically don't. I just want everyone to kind of move that direction. All right, man. Well, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's we'll see. I mean, I guess I'm usually not too much of a hypothetical kind of person. Um, don't like to try to speculate too much about the future, but just curious. Like we're all in here, grinding away and having fun making faces. Just curious what your thoughts were.
yeah, well, I definitely hope we're gonna keep growing because I'm kind of trying to make this like a more legitimate thing, you know.
Yeah,
So we'll see how it goes.
you are doing your part.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and talk with me. And I had a lot of fun, especially watching your videos and kind of trying to get inside your brain and see what makes you tick. And I appreciate the time you spent with us.
Well, thank you so much for doing these. I mean, I've really enjoyed watching these. Look forward to the continuing series.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to try to get everybody. It's going to take a while, but
Yeah.
I'm going to try to get everyone. All right, man. Well, thanks again and take care. Have a good one.
Great to talk to you.
Once again, that was Kevin Van Sant of B Sharp Watches. I just want to thank you all for joining us today. I hope you had a good time, and I know I did. I certainly enjoyed talking with Kevin and checking out that amazing workflow video. What was your favorite part about that time lapse? Leave a comment down below, and consider liking and subscribing if you want to see more videos like this, as well as tips and tricks for designing your watch faces and tutorials coming soon. Um, I greatly appreciate you all being here. Once again, thank you all. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.